My sister stole my husband on our 5th anniversary. Not metaphorically, literally. That night, I came home early with a cake box balanced on one arm and a card I'd spent an embarrassing amount of time picking out. And I found her car parked crooked in our driveway, like she hadn't planned on staying long. She stayed for 3 years. Before we go further, if you love family drama and karma stories like this, hit that subscribe button now, because what happens at that reunion is something you don't want to miss. Let's get into it. 3 years later, she stood up at our family's 4th of July reunion, red plastic cup raised, and told 40 relatives that my life was sad and small. Everyone laughed. My mother laughed loudest, the way she does when she wants a room to know exactly whose side she's on. I didn't say a word. Not yet. I was still doing the math in my head, and the math wasn't finished. My name is Maren Ellison, and for most of my life, I was the reliable one, the daughter who remembered appointments, the sister who covered shifts, the one nobody worried about because worrying about me had simply never occurred to anyone. My sister Talia was the golden one. She got the benefit of the doubt before she'd even done anything to earn it. The way some people get a head start in a race nobody else knew was happening. I didn't resent her for that, not for a long time. You don't resent water for being wet. You learn to build your life around it, the way a tree grows sideways around a boulder it can't move. I built my whole personality around not needing anything, because needing things, in my family, was Talia's job. She needed attention. I needed nothing. That was the arrangement, unspoken and total. Colton and I met in a university library that smelled like old carpet and burnt coffee, during a week I was supposed to be studying for an exam I barely remember taking. He was funny in a low, dry way that took people a while to notice. He'd say something quiet under his breath and then wait, almost shy, to see if you'd caught it. I caught it. I kept catching it for the next 11 years. We got married young, 24 and 26, in a backyard with string lights my father hung himself, standing on a ladder he insisted he didn't need help with. My mother gave a toast that somehow made congratulations sound like a warning, something about how young marriages have a lot to prove. I remember laughing it off. I remember Colton squeezing my hand under the table. For 5 years we built something ordinary and good. The kind of life nobody makes a movie about because nothing about it is dramatic enough. A small blue house with a stubborn garage door. A rescue dog named Biscuit who hated the mailman with real conviction. A 5-year plan that included kids eventually. Once my consulting business stopped eating every spare dollar we had and started paying us back. That business, the one my family called Maren's little side thing whenever it came up, which was rarely, was the seed of everything that came later, though none of us knew it yet. Nobody in my family ever asked how it was going. Talia asked once, at a barbecue, phone already glowing in her hand before I'd finished my first sentence, nodding at intervals that had nothing to do with what I was saying. Talia had always orbited close to Colton, closer than felt entirely normal, but never close enough to point at directly. Family dinners, holidays, movie nights, the 3 of us shared because she didn't want to be the awkward third wheel with anyone else. I told myself, that meant she trusted us enough to be herself around us. It meant she was watching, learning our rhythms, waiting for an opening she hadn't consciously admitted to herself she wanted yet. The night I found her car in our driveway, I stood on the sidewalk for 4 full minutes before I made myself walk to the door. I remember counting the porch lights up and down the street, trying to give my brain enough time to construct an innocent explanation. Car trouble, a surprise party, a borrowed casserole dish. I never found one that fit. Some part of me had already known, the way you know a storm is coming before the sky actually changes color. What I found instead, when I finally opened the door, was my sister's laughter drifting out of my own kitchen, easy and warm, and my husband's voice underneath it in a low, unguarded tone I hadn't heard him use with me in over a year. I stood in my own hallway, cake box still in my hands, and understood in one long, silent second that the life I thought I had was already over, even though nobody in that kitchen had noticed me yet. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the cake, though some primal part of me considered it. I set the box down carefully on the porch step, like it still deserved gentleness, walked back to my car on legs that didn't feel entirely mine, and drove to Priya's apartment without a single clear thought in my head the entire way. I don't remember the drive. I remember arriving. Priya opened the door in pajama pants and a t-shirt from a 5K. She never actually ran, took one look at my face and said, "Okay, come in. Don't talk yet," before I'd said a single word. That's the kind of friend she is, the kind who reads the room before the room even knows what it's saying. I sat on her couch and didn't talk for almost 20 minutes. She just sat with me, which turned out to be exactly what I needed. I talked eventually, all night, actually, in fragments that didn't always connect. The crooked car, the cake, the sound of my sister's laugh in a kitchen that used to be mine. Somewhere around 3 in the morning, after the first wave of tears had dried into something colder and steadier, Priya asked the question that quietly became the spine of the next 3 years of my life. "Okay," she said. "So what are you going to build instead?" I didn't have an answer that night. I barely had an answer the following week, when I finally called Colton back and listened to him apologize in a voice that sounded genuinely sorry and completely unable to stop himself anyway. He didn't defend what he'd done. He didn't really explain it either. He just kept saying it happened like the affair was weather, something that had simply occurred to him rather than something he'd chosen, day after day, for months. The divorce took 8 months, which people told me was fast, though it didn't feel fast from inside it. Colton didn't fight much. Guilt does that to a person, softens their grip on things they'd normally hold tightly. Talia didn't come to a single mediation session, but she posted a sunset photo the same week our house went up for sale, captioned "New Beginnings 3, little dots of punctuation that told me more about her state of mind than any conversation would have. My mother's first real reaction wasn't concern for me. It was concern for the family photo at Thanksgiving and whether we could all still fit in it comfortably. "Can't we all just be adults about this?" she asked me over the phone, her voice light, as if adulthood simply meant swallowing my own humiliation quietly enough that nobody else had to feel the temperature drop in the room. My father said less than my mother, the way he always had, but he hugged me a beat longer than usual the day I moved the last box out of the house Colton and I had shared for 6 years. It wasn't much, as gestures go. From him, a man who communicated almost entirely in small, careful actions. It was close to everything he had to give. And I understood that even then. Talia and Colton got married 11 months after my divorce was finalized, in a venue with a view of the ocean that Colton and I had once looked at together, half joking, when we were saving for our own wedding years earlier. I wasn't invited. I found out about the date from a mutual friend who assumed, wrongly and a little awkwardly, that I already knew, and had to backtrack mid-sentence when my silence told her otherwise. The family, to my quiet astonishment, adjusted almost instantly. The way water finds a new channel after a storm reroutes the ground, Talia became the one who finally found real happiness. I became the one who's still a little bitter about everything. Bless her heart, a phrase my Aunt Beverly used at 3 separate family gatherings, each time with the same practiced sympathy, as if she'd rehearsed it in a mirror. I stopped attending most family events that first year, which nobody seemed to notice much. Or, if they did, nobody said so out loud. Every time I did show up, someone found a way to mention how glowing Talia looked lately, how settled Colton seemed, how nice it was to finally see everyone happy again, as though my absence from that happiness was a minor scheduling inconvenience rather than the actual cost of it. What none of them knew, what none of them ever thought to ask, not once, in all that time, was what I was actually doing during all those Sunday dinners I skipped. all those birthday parties I sent gifts to but didn't attend. All those months I let the family assume I was simply sulking somewhere, licking wounds nobody had bothered to look at closely. I was working, not the little side thing my family had dismissed for years without ever asking a single follow-up question. But something bigger, something I hadn't fully believed in myself yet either. Priya and I had been quietly, carefully building a logistics software platform, the kind of unglamorous, invisible infrastructure that mid-size shipping and warehouse companies desperately needed and didn't yet know how to properly ask for. It wasn't overnight success, not by any measure. It was 18-hour days fueled by instant noodles and stubbornness. It was to investors who said no, politely but firmly. Before a third one finally said yes after a pitch meeting I nearly canceled out of pure exhaustion. It was the kind of grinding, unphotogenic effort nobody claps for at a family barbecue, the kind that only shows itself later, all at once, like a tree that was growing roots the whole time everyone thought it was dying. By the second year after the divorce, our company, Wren Logistics Solutions, named half after a bird Priya liked and half because every other name was already taken, had signed its first major regional client. A mid-size freight and warehousing firm called Talworth Freight. A name I typed into a contract without a flicker of recognition, without any sense that it would ever mean anything more to me than a signature and a wire transfer. I didn't think much of the name at signing, not that day, and not for months afterward. It was just another win in a stack of wins that were finally, slowly starting to accumulate into something that resembled real momentum. I didn't connect the dots until roughly 3 months later, sitting in a routine account integration meeting, when a project manager mentioned offhand that Talworth had recently absorbed a smaller regional operation to expand its logistics footprint. That smaller operation, it turned out, was called Reyes Transport Coordination, Colton's employer, the company he had worked at steadily, unremarkably, for the past 2 years. The one whose name I'd heard mentioned at exactly one family dinner and mentally filed away without a second thought. Back before it had any reason to matter to me at all. I sat with that information for a long time before I told anyone, even Priya, even though she was sitting 3 feet away from me in our shared office when I first pieced it together. There's a strange, disorienting kind of vertigo that comes from realizing the universe has handed you leverage you never asked for, never went looking for, and now have to decide what, if anything, to do with. I could have walked away from the contract entirely. Plenty of people would have, out of pride or discomfort, or the simple and understandable desire to never think about Colton's paycheck, or his job, or his life, ever again. I sat with a draft termination email open on my laptop for nearly an hour one night. I almost sent it. My cursor hovered over the button longer than I'd like to admit. But Priya asked me a question that stuck to the inside of my skull for weeks afterward. "Are you protecting your peace?" she said, not unkindly looking up from her own laptop, "or are you protecting their comfort? Because those aren't the same thing, and I think you're confusing them right now." I didn't have a good answer that night. So I closed the draft email, kept the contract, said nothing to anyone, and let the software do exactly what it was built to do, quietly, efficiently, and extremely well. Over the following year, Wren Logistics became the operational backbone of 3 of Talworth's 4 regional divisions, including, as it happened, the division that had absorbed Reyes Transport Coordination. Colton's job, his roots, his schedule, his division's day-to-day workflow, the software he almost certainly complained about at dinner without ever knowing whose name was on the license agreement, ran, quietly and completely, on infrastructure I owned. He never knew, and there was no particular reason he ever would have. My company operated under its formal corporate name, dealt directly with Talworth's executive leadership, and Colton sat 3 full management layers removed from ever seeing an invoice, a contract, or a signature with my name anywhere on it. He was, in the most literal sense, working inside a structure I had built without either of us realizing it until it was already finished. I kept my head down through most of that year. I hired 2 more developers and a client relations lead. I let my company grow into something real. Something that had absolutely nothing to do with being anyone's daughter, anyone's ex-wife, or anyone's younger sister's shadow. A phrase I hadn't even realized described me until I finally stepped out of it and felt, for the first time in years, like I could see the whole shape of myself. Meanwhile, the family narrative calcified around Talia, the way narratives do when nobody bothers to question them. She posted vacation photos from a resort in Cabo. She posted a kitchen renovation, granite countertops gleaming under professional lighting. She posted a video of Colton surprising her with a weekend trip to wine country, captioned, "He still shows up for me every single day," a caption that made something in my chest clench briefly before I closed the app and didn't open it again for a week. I liked none of it. I commented on none of it. I simply kept building, quietly, the way you keep watering a plant nobody else believes will grow. Because you've decided, somewhere along the way, that whether they believe in it or not isn't actually the point anymore. What people didn't see behind those glossy photos was the truth, Priya. And I started noticing buried in the account performance data, the unglamorous spreadsheets nobody outside our industry would ever think twice about, but which told a much less flattering story than Talia's captions ever would. Talworth's regional freight division, the one housing Reyes Transport Coordination, had been quietly underperforming for nearly a full year. Route inefficiencies stacked on route inefficiencies. Missed delivery windows. A management structure stretched thin after the acquisition, trying to absorb an entire second company's worth of operations without hiring nearly enough people to actually run it well. Colton's division wasn't failing because of him specifically, the data made that much clear, but it was failing, undeniably, and everyone whose paycheck ran through it was standing on ground that was quietly, slowly cracking beneath them. It wasn't only the business that tested me that year. My grandmother's old house, the one where she'd taught me the potato salad recipe, the one that had sat empty since her passing went up for sale unexpectedly, and for a single reckless afternoon, I considered draining most of my company's early reserves just to buy it back before a developer could. Priya talked me out of it gently, reminding me that sentiment and strategy rarely survive being mixed together in the same decision. I let the house go. Some things you have to release twice before they actually leave you. I found out how serious it had become through a routine quarterly review call, the kind of unremarkable business meeting nobody outside a spreadsheet would ever think twice about. Talworth's leadership team was weighing 2 options on the table: restructure the underperforming division from the ground up, or shut it down entirely and absorb its remaining accounts into a better-performing branch 2 states away. A move that would have quietly ended every job attached to it. As majority equity holder in Wren Logistics, the company Talworth depended on to run the software backbone of its entire supply chain. I had a seat at that table. Not a controlling vote, not the final word, but a real one. The kind that gets asked direct questions and expected to answer them honestly. My recommendations, I was told plainly by the CFO before the meeting started, would carry real weight in whatever decision came next. I sat in that meeting, laptop open, spreadsheet glowing in front of me, and thought, unbidden, unwelcome, about the anniversary cake I'd left sitting on my own porch, step 3 years earlier. About the mediation sessions Talia never once showed up to. About my mother telling me to just be an adult while everyone else in the family got to be exactly as petty, as public, as theatrical as they wanted, without a single consequence following them home. I said nothing about Colton by name in that meeting, and I want to be honest about that, because it would have been easy to let the personal history bleed into the professional decision, and I understood, sitting there, that doing so would make me exactly the kind of person my family already believed me to be. I recommended what the data actually supported. restructuring rather than elimination because I genuinely believed it was the correct operational call. Not because of any old wound I still carried. I did note, quietly, almost as an afterthought, that the final decision wouldn't be locked in for another 6 weeks. 6 weeks, which put the finalized decision squarely around the date of our family's annual 4th of July reunion. The one being hosted this year, for the first time, at Talia and Colton's new house. The one with the granite countertops and the professionally lit kitchen photos. I stared at that date on my calendar for a long moment after the meeting ended, feeling something settle into place that I couldn't yet name. I almost didn't go. I'd skipped the last 2 reunions entirely, and no one had noticed enough to actually ask me why, which had honestly stung more than I let myself admit at the time. But something in me, call it curiosity, call it a need for closure, I hadn't realized I was still carrying, call it the universe quietly setting up a scene it had been building toward for 3 years, made me open the group text and RSVP, yes, before I'd fully decided to. Priya thought I was out of my mind. You're walking into a house funded by a job that literally runs on your software, she said, ticking points off on her fingers from across our office, hosted by the sister who stole your husband, in front of your entire extended family. And you're bringing what? Exactly a fruit salad, I told her, potato salad, and that I wasn't walking in with an agenda. Just information, and that there was in fact a real difference between the two, whether or not she believed me yet. The morning of the reunion, I got up early and dressed carefully. Though not for Talia, not for Colton, and not even really for my mother's inevitable commentary. I dressed the way you dress when you already know, deep down, exactly who you are, and you no longer need the outfit to argue your case for you. Clean lines, nothing flashy. The kind of quiet confidence that doesn't announce itself and doesn't need to. I called my father the night before, mostly to confirm what time to arrive. Though some quieter part of me was really calling to hear his voice before walking into a house full of people who'd spent 3 years deciding what my life looked like without ever once checking. He didn't say much, as usual. Just, glad you're coming. And then, after a pause that lasted a beat too long to be nothing, your grandmother would be proud of what you built, you know, whether anyone else notices it or not. I sat with that sentence for a long time after we hung up. I made the potato salad the night before, the recipe my grandmother taught me before she passed. The one nobody else in the family had bothered to learn because it took actual effort and multiple steps that couldn't be rushed. I remember standing in my kitchen at 11 at night, chopping celery, thinking about how strange it was that I was about to walk into a house I'd never seen in person, built partly on foundations I owned, and nobody there knew it. The house, when I pulled up, was genuinely beautiful. I won't pretend otherwise. A sprawling backyard edged with new landscaping string lights already hung in preparation for the evening, even though it was barely noon. A smoker parked near the fence line that Colton had clearly been babysitting since sunrise. Judging by the faint, exhausted look already on his face, it looked exactly like the photos. It looked, in fact, better than the photos, which somehow made everything that followed feel more inevitable. My mother greeted me at the gate with the particular brightness she reserves for moments she wants witnessed by as many relatives as possible. "You came," she announced, loud enough for at least 3 conversations to pause. "Doesn't she look good, everyone? A little thin, but good." I smiled, set the potato salad on the folding table, and said nothing, letting the comment dissolve into the general noise of the party, the way most of her comments eventually did, if you simply waited them out. Talia found me within 4 minutes, as she always seemed to, homing in on me across a crowded room with an instinct I'd never quite understood. She hugged me the particular way people hug someone they've quietly decided to feel sorry for, a beat too long, a little too tight. Her chin resting on my shoulder in a way that felt performed for whoever might be watching rather than felt for me specifically. "I'm just so glad you came," she said, pulling back, her voice pitched to carry across the patio. "I know things have been hard for you." she said. Hard, the way you'd describe a difficult diagnosis. Soft and careful and slightly pitying, and I watched two aunts nearby exchange a glance that told me this particular narrative had been well rehearsed among the family long before I ever walked through the gate. I smiled and said nothing in return, which unsettled her slightly. I could see it in the flicker behind her eyes. The brief recalibration of someone expecting resistance and receiving silence instead. I'd learned, over 3 long years, that silence unnerves people who are used to filling every available room with themselves, who need a reaction to know the performance is landing. I gave her nothing to work with, and she moved on to greet my Aunt Beverly instead, visibly recovering her footing. The afternoon unfolded the way family reunions always do. Burgers and hot dogs, a lopsided game of badminton between cousins who hadn't played since childhood. My niece and 2 other kids shrieking happily through a sprinkler someone had set up near the fence. My Aunt Beverly circulated the yard like a one-woman news network, collecting and redistributing information with the efficiency of someone who had clearly been doing this her entire life. I stayed near the edges, the way I always had, watching more than participating, though something in me felt steadier than it usually did at these things. Colton and I exchanged maybe 6 words the entire afternoon, mostly logistical. The burgers are almost ready, that kind of thing, and each time, his eyes slid away from mine a half-second too quickly, the way they had at every family event since the divorce. As if some part of him still expected a confrontation that had never actually come. I almost felt sorry for the tension he was carrying. Almost. It was around 6 in the evening, drinks flowing a little more loosely by then, plates mostly cleared, when Talia decided the party needed a toast. She climbed the 2 back porch steps, plastic cup raised, and waited for the yard to quiet down before thanking everyone for coming to celebrate. In her words, "How far we've all come," a phrase that already made something in me go very still. Though I couldn't have said exactly why yet. Especially me, she added with a small laugh, scanning the crowd until her eyes landed directly on mine. I know things have been kind of a roller coaster for some of us the past few years. A few relatives chuckled uncertainly, unsure yet which direction this particular speech was headed, though something in the set of her shoulders told me she already knew exactly where she wanted it to go. A few uncomfortable laughs rippled through the crowd, the kind people give when they aren't sure if they're supposed to laugh yet but feel social pressure to react anyway. My mother's laugh was not uncomfortable at all. It was delighted, immediate, entirely unguarded. And it landed on me like a small, familiar blow, one I'd absorbed so many times over the years that I barely registered the sting anymore, though I noticed it this time, sharper than usual. I mean, no offense, Talia continued, clearly warming to the attention, now gathering around her, cup still raised. But it's kind of amazing how differently things turned out for the 2 of us. I've got Colton, this beautiful house, the kitchen of my literal dreams. She paused there, scanning for the punchline she'd clearly already written in her head before the party even started. And you've got, what do you even have going on these days? The little consulting thing. Still. Someone near the badminton net laughed outright at that, a short bark of a sound quickly muffled. My father did not laugh. Colton, to his credit, looked deeply, visibly uncomfortable, and suddenly found the smoker in urgent need of his attention. Walking toward it with the studied purposefulness of a man trying very hard to be somewhere else without technically leaving the party. Honestly, Talia pressed on, clearly enjoying herself now, riding the small wave of attention like she'd been starved for it. I used to feel bad for you. I really did. But now I just feel like some people are built for big lives, you know? And some people are built for smaller, quieter, sadder ones. And that's okay. Not everybody gets to have it all. Somebody has to be the quiet one, right? The backyard went a little too quiet after that. Quiet in the specific way a room goes when everyone present has just heard something they know crossed a line. And nobody yet knows whether to acknowledge it or pretend they didn't. 40 relatives, a half-abandoned badminton net, and my sister standing 2 steps above all of it, like she'd just delivered a graduation speech she was extremely proud of, waiting for applause that hadn't quite materialized. I set my potato salad spoon down on the folding table beside me, not dramatically, not with any flourish, just deliberately, the way you set something down when you've decided, quietly and completely, that you're about to need both hands free. I felt Priya's earlier question echo somewhere in the back of my mind. Protecting your peace or protecting their comfort, and I understood, standing there, exactly which one I'd been doing for 3 straight years. "Can I say something?" I asked, and my voice came out steadier than I expected it to. Steadier than I'd rehearsed it in my head on the drive over, if I was being honest with myself. The words weren't planned. They arrived the way true things sometimes do, fully formed, right when you need them. Talia's smile flickered, just slightly. The particular flicker it always did, when something wasn't unfolding exactly according to the script she'd written in her head beforehand. "Sure," she said, a beat too quickly, glancing around at the gathered family as if to confirm she still had their attention. "Go for it." A few relatives shifted their weight, sensing something in the air the way people sense weather changing before the first drop of rain actually falls. My mother's bright smile tightened almost imperceptibly around the edges. The way it always did whenever a family gathering threatened to veer somewhere she couldn't control the ending of. "You're right, that things turned out really differently for us," I said, and I meant it, because it was true, and I wanted to start from something true. I want to be clear about that first, because I think it actually matters. Talia's cup lowered a few inches, some of her earlier confidence visibly draining out of her posture. "Okay," she said slowly, "but—" "I'm not finished," I said, gently, but with a steadiness that surprised even me as I heard myself say it out loud for the first time in front of anyone. 3 years ago, I lost my husband, my house, and for a while, most of this family's benefit of the doubt, all in the same year. I didn't fight to get any of it back. I decided, instead, to build something. My company is called Wren Logistics Solutions, I continued, before anyone could interrupt me. Some of you have never heard the name. Because I've never talked about work at these things, mostly because nobody ever asked, and I stopped offering information nobody seemed interested in receiving. It's not the little consulting thing anymore. It's the software backbone for Talworth Freight, one of the largest regional logistics companies operating on this entire coast. A confused murmur moved through the yard. My mother frowned, clearly trying to determine in real time whether this development posed a threat to the pleasant mood of her party, weighing whether to intervene or wait it out. And Beverly, I noticed, had gone completely, uncharacteristically silent, drink forgotten in her hand. Talworth acquired a smaller regional company about 2 years ago, I said, my eyes moving deliberately toward the smoker where Colton stood, frozen mid-motion, spatula in hand, his back suddenly rigid. Rhea's, Transport Coordination, Colton's company, the one he's worked at for the past 2 years. Colton's head came up slowly from the grill, and his expression moved through several distinct stages in the space of about 2 seconds: confusion, recognition, dawning disbelief, landing finally on something that looked almost like fear. Though whether it was fear for himself or fear of what I might say next, I honestly couldn't tell in that moment, and I'm not sure it mattered. "For the last year and a half," I said, turning my attention back to the yard at large. My voice steady, the software running Colton's entire division, his routes, his scheduling, his division's performance metrics. All of it has belonged to my company. I'm the majority equity holder in the business that quite literally keeps his job functioning day to day. The backyard fell into a silence so complete I could hear the sprinkler still running somewhere near the fence. And a child, somewhere off to the side, loudly asking if there was any more lemonade left. Utterly oblivious to what had just landed in the middle of the adult conversation happening a few feet away from him. I didn't say anything about any of this before now. I went on, because it genuinely wasn't relevant to me on a personal level. It was just business. I want to be clear, I'm still not standing here to make it personal, even now. I'm only saying it because you just stood up there and told this entire family, in front of everyone, that my life is small and sad. Talia's face had gone pale beneath the sun-flushed color she'd carried all afternoon. That doesn't even make sense, she said, her voice noticeably thinner now, less certain than it had been a full minute earlier. You're lying. You have to be lying. I'm not, I said simply, without raising my voice, without any of the satisfaction I might have expected to feel and, strangely, didn't. Colton's division has been underperforming for the better part of a year now. That's not some secret I dug up. It's sitting right there in every quarterly report Talworth's leadership reviews. They've been deciding for weeks now whether to restructure that division from the ground up, or shut it down entirely and move all its remaining accounts to a better-performing branch 2 states away. What does that have to do with anything? Talia's voice cracked audibly on the last word, and I watched her hand tighten around her cup until her knuckles paled. Because I sat in the meeting where that decision got made, I said quietly, letting the words land at their own pace rather than rushing them. And 2 days ago, I recommended restructuring instead of elimination. Not because of you. Not because of Colton, specifically. Because the actual data supported it. And because destroying someone's livelihood out of old spite was never who I wanted to become, even after everything that happened between us. Nobody in that backyard spoke for what felt like a very long time. Even my mother, for what might have been the first occasion in my entire adult life, had absolutely nothing bright or deflecting to offer the moment. Her mouth opening slightly and then closing again without producing a single word. I didn't know, Talia said finally, quieter now. Some of the theatrical confidence completely drained out of her voice, replaced by something that sounded almost like a genuine question. I didn't. How were we supposed to know any of this? You never said anything. You never told anyone what you were actually working on. You weren't supposed to know, I said, because you never asked. Not once, in 3 years, did you or anyone else standing in this yard ask me a single real question about my life, what I was building, how I was doing, whether I was okay after everything. You just decided, collectively, what my life looked like, and you kept repeating that story to each other until everyone believed it completely, including, for a while, almost me. My father stood up slowly from his folding lawn chair near the fence, the metal creaking under the shift of his weight. He didn't say anything dramatic, didn't make a speech of his own. He simply walked over, put one weathered hand on my shoulder, squeezed once, and said, "I'm proud of you," in a voice pitched loud enough that the entire yard heard it clearly, unmistakably, and nobody in that yard missed what it meant. My mother opened her mouth again, visibly searching for something, anything, to say that might redirect the moment back toward familiar, comfortable ground. Nothing came. For the first time in longer than I could actually remember, she chose silence over performance, and I watched something in her expression shift, almost imperceptibly, into something that might eventually, with time, become closer to shame. Colton finally set down his spatula and crossed the yard toward us. His voice low when he spoke, meant more for me than for the crowd still watching. "I didn't know any of this," he said. "I swear to you, Moran, I had absolutely no idea it was." He stopped, seeming to run out of the sentence halfway through, unsure how to finish it in front of everyone watching. "I know," I said, and I meant it fully, without bitterness. This had stopped being about him a long time ago. Somewhere in those quiet 18-hour workdays that had nothing to do with proving anything to anyone in this yard, though it had taken me most of 3 years to fully understand that myself. I picked my potato salad spoon back up off the folding table because I was, quite honestly, still hungry. And this particular conversation had run its natural course as far as I was concerned. The restructuring goes through next month, I said, mostly to Colton now, my tone softening slightly. Your division isn't going anywhere. That part is real. That part isn't a threat, or a warning, or anything else. It's simply true, and I wanted you to hear it directly from me, instead of secondhand. Talia sat down hard on the porch step behind her. The toast she'd raised so confidently minutes earlier, now hanging forgotten and half-spilled in her hand. A small dark stain spreading across the wood beneath her. The golden child, for what might have genuinely been the first time in her entire life, had run completely out of a script, and I watched her search the faces around her for the familiar rescue that always used to come, and find none waiting. I stayed another hour after that, longer than I'd originally planned to. I talked with my cousins about nothing important. I ate too much watermelon straight off the rind, the way I used to as a kid at these same reunions. I let my niece show me a cartwheel she was clearly, fiercely proud of, clapping for her the way you clap for a child who has no idea and doesn't need to what just happened in the yard behind her a little while earlier. My mother approached me once more before I left, hovering near my car with an expression I didn't entirely recognize on her, something uncertain, something that might have been the beginning of an apology if she'd had the vocabulary for one yet. She didn't say much. I didn't know either, she offered, which wasn't quite an apology, but wasn't nothing either, coming from her. I told her I believed she didn't, and that maybe, someday, she might think harder about why that was. I left before dark, calmly, unhurried, the way you leave a place you no longer need anything from. Priya called me on the drive home, and I could hear the worry in her voice before she even finished asking how it had gone. Good, I told her, and somewhere around the second stoplight I realized, almost to my own surprise, that I actually meant it completely. Not because I'd won some contest against my sister, but because, for the first time in 3 long years, I had told the truth out loud. In front of everyone who mattered, and the sky hadn't fallen. Only the story my family had been quietly telling about me had. Priya was waiting up when I got back that night, 2 mugs of tea already made, one of them going cold on the counter beside her because she hadn't been entirely sure I'd want it warm or just wanted something to hold. I told her everything, start to finish, the toast, the silence, my father's hand on my shoulder. Talia sitting down hard on the porch step with her drink forgotten in her hand. Priya listened the whole way through without interrupting once, and when I finally finished, she just said, "You didn't even raise your voice, did you? Not really a question?" I hadn't. I hadn't needed to. In the weeks that followed, things shifted slowly, unevenly, the way most real change does rather than the way it does in the version of this story someone might tell at a dinner party. Talia texted me twice, short and stiff, feeling out whether the bridge between us was fully burned or just badly scorched. I didn't rush to answer either time. Some things deserve to sit for a while before you decide what to do with them. The restructuring at Talworth went through exactly as I'd said it would. Quietly, in a press release nobody at that reunion would ever bother to read. Colton kept his job, kept his house, kept the life he and Talia had built on the version of me they'd both decided, years ago, was safe to underestimate. I never once brought it up to him again. I never needed to. The point had already been made, once, clearly, and repeating it would only have cheapened it. My father started calling me more often after that reunion. Short calls, mostly, just to check in, something he'd rarely done in the years before. My mother, for her part, softened slowly, in small, unspoken ways, an extra invitation here. A comment held back there, never quite apologizing outright, but never mocking me again either. Which, from her, was its own quiet form of acknowledgement. Wren Logistics kept growing. We signed 2 more regional clients that fall, hired a fourth developer, moved into an office that actually had windows. Priya framed a printout of our very first rejected pitch deck and hung it by the door. A reminder, she said, of exactly how far we'd both come from those 18-hour instant noodle nights nobody had ever clapped for. I think about that reunion sometimes, not with anger anymore, but with a kind of quiet, settled clarity. My sister spent years building a life designed to be admired from the outside. And I spent those same years building something sturdier, something that didn't need anyone's applause to remain true. Talia and I didn't speak much for the rest of that summer. It wasn't a dramatic silence, no slammed doors or blocked numbers, just a natural distance settling in where something forced and brittle used to sit instead. I found, somewhat to my own surprise, that I didn't miss the version of closeness we'd had. It had never really been closeness. It had been proximity, and there's a difference. One I hadn't fully understood until I finally had room to notice it. By Christmas that year, my mother hosted dinner again, smaller than usual, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, nobody made a joke at my expense over the mashed potatoes. Talia sat across the table, quieter than I'd ever seen her at a family gathering, asking me an actual question about Ren logistics, a real one, with follow-up, and I answered it plainly, without warmth exactly, but without armor either. It was a start. I didn't need it to be more than that yet. Colton and I never spoke about the reunion again, not directly, but the following spring, he sent me a short email, 3 sentences. No explanation attached, thanking me for the restructuring recommendation and admitting, in his own understated way, that he understood now what it must have cost me to say nothing for as long as I had. I read it twice, appreciated it for what it was, and didn't feel the need to write anything back. Some doors don't need to be reopened to be respected. A year after the reunion, Ren Logistics signed its largest contract yet, with a company 3 times the size of Talworth, and Priya and I stood in our office late one evening, looking at the signed paperwork. Both of us, a little stunned by how far a little side thing had actually traveled. I thought, briefly, of my mother's old phrase, and found I could finally hear it without flinching, just a fact from an old story that no longer applied to the person I'd become. People sometimes ask me, when I tell pieces of this story, whether I regret staying quiet for those 3 years, instead of confronting Talia the moment I found out about the software connection. I don't. Some victories only mean something if you let them build in silence first, uninterrupted until the moment they're ready to speak entirely for themselves. The way mine finally did. In a backyard full of string lights on a July evening, nobody in my family will ever forget whether they admit it out loud or not. If this story hit home, make sure you're subscribed for more real family drama and karma-style stories every day. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had a moment where the truth finally spoke for itself?